Good afternoon. Welcome to the News Roundup for Friday, September 5th, 2025. I'm your host, Bill Thomas. We have some pressing stories to share with you today, and here's what's happening right now on the Big Roundup. We begin with this: the Pentagon defending their unconditional right to protect America by targeting and killing suspected drug smugglers. The Trump administration scoring a major legal victory, which concerns the detention center known as Alligator Alcatraz, and federal agents arresting hundreds of illegal immigrants during a massive enforcement raid at a Hyundai factory in Georgia. Also, President Trump giving our nation's Defense Department a brand new name, and Tesla's Elon Musk is on his way to becoming the world's first trillionaire. We'll tell you all about the enormous deal which could help him skyrocket to that mythical milestone. All this and more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have so much to get to today, and we begin with our nation's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who's now standing firmly behind the U.S. military's legal right to conduct the recent airstrike that killed 11 alleged drug-running Tren de Aragua gang members, all while they were traveling in a speedboat off the coast of Venezuela. The Pentagon's top dog now saying the U.S. has absolute and complete authority to target suspected drug smugglers and while they're crossing international waters, and simply because defending the American people gives our military that power. He says that earlier this week, our military knew exactly who was riding in the targeted vessel and precisely what they were up to when they smoked the drug boat. Goes on to reiterate that everyone on board was associated with the Venezuela-based Tren de Aragua gang and that they were all on their way to poison our country with illegal narcotics. Hegseth also says that if any other drug-dealing criminals make a similar mistake in the future, they're going to meet with the exact same fate as their comrades and likewise wind up at the bottom of the sea. The defense secretary goes on to further justify the military action by explaining that during the previous Biden administration, nearly 100,000 Americans were killed each year as the result of our nation's open border policy, which basically allowed drugs to flow freely into our country. Says the smuggling of these illegal narcotics adds up to a vicious assault against our entire population. President Trump says the U.S. military carried out the strike on his explicit orders, says the victims were all terrorists who were in the process of transporting illegal drugs to our shores, and that the action should serve as a clear message to anyone who's thinking of bringing drugs to the USA. In case you're not aware, the president, he's been doubling down on his promise to safeguard our nation from the scourge of criminal drug traffickers by ordering the military to target Latin American drug cartels while deploying several warships off the coast of Venezuela. We've all seen those pictures. Now, for his part, Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro says that the president's moves are completely unjustified, totally criminal, and a bloody threat to his entire country. Maduro also responded by deploying several warships of his own out to sea in that area. In the meantime, a number of people still questioning the legality of the U.S. airstrike, and they point out that in our nation, there's currently no death penalty for the crime of drug trafficking. A final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. To ensure that we all understand the full weight and gravity of the unimaginable comments made by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and at the risk of sounding semi-redundant, check this out, and here's exactly what he says. He says the U.S. has the absolute and complete authority to kill suspected drug smugglers in defense of the American people. Now, look, by and large, I support the Trump administration, but the secretary got this one 100% wrong and sounds like somebody needs an education in human rights. We don't kill suspects. It's wholly incorrect, disturbing, and dangerous to suggest that at any time on any level, the U.S. has complete authority to kill a suspect. Not a convicted criminal, just a suspect. Now, I'm not one of those highfalutin big city lawyers, but we have a thing here in the U.S. which makes clear that if or when someone is suspected of a crime, they're afforded due process. They can be arrested, charged with a crime, have their day in court, and if found guilty, appropriate punishment that would be doled out by a judge. For our country's Secretary of Defense, a high-ranking cabinet official, the claim that we can kill suspects is brutally dangerous rhetoric, and he's establishing a horrible precedent which we should all stand up against. Now, producer Davey joining us from the home office in Washington, D.C. And Davey, whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? This, in my mind, is utterly abhorrent. What are you thinking?
Well, Bill, I think in this case, the Secretary of Defense is probably alleging that, this is sort of a military thing and not a civil or a criminal thing. So as military action goes, if you're at war, you don't exactly put all of your combatants on trial. So I think that's probably what he's kind of getting at.
Perhaps, but we're not at war. And again, these are suspects. They haven't been convicted of any crime. So his remarks, I think, are very, very dangerous. But what do you think? Drop us a note, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Hey, Dave, you over to the email bag. I imagine people are as up in arms about this as I am. And what are folks saying?
Yeah, they are, Bill. Here's one from Lucy in Portland, Oregon.
All right, Lucy, what's on your mind? What do you think?
She says, "Are you out of your mind, Hegseth? You are not the judge, jury, and executioner. And if that boat was off near the shores of Venezuela, how do you even know where it was going?"
Yeah. Well, they've got some kind of intel, and it was in international waters. But regardless of what intel you've got, these are nothing more than suspects. And they made that very clear. Suspects. They are afforded due process. So these actions right now, in his words, highly inflammatory. And as I said moments ago, he's setting a real bad precedent. This is real dangerous. And who's up next, Davey?
Okay, Bill, here's a different view from Peter, who's writing to us from Columbia, South Carolina.
Great to hear from you, Peter. State your business, sir.
Peter says, "I definitely agree with our government taking aggressive military action against drug-dealing scumbags wherever possible. If we never teach those criminal terrorists a lesson, they'll just keep on killing Americans until there's no one left."
Well, they're alleged drug dealer scumbags. They're not drug dealer scumbags. Alleged, very important. Hey, look, Hegseth, he's saying this in large part in defense of the ship that was targeted off the coast of Venezuela earlier this week, but it could happen again tomorrow, and so on and so on. He's absolutely wrong. The U.S. does not murder suspects, drug suspects, kidnapping suspects, or any suspects. We don't murder suspects. They have to be afforded due process. They need that trial. If they were known drug suspects and the intel was accurate, okay, but they should have been taken into custody, tried for their crimes, and not just summarily murdered or executed. This is all kinds of wrong. All right, change things up here just a bit and turn our attention now to a significant legal victory for the Trump administration concerning their efforts to detain and deport immigrants who are in our country illegally. A federal appeals court now ruling that the Florida detention center known as Alligator Alcatraz, which we all know about now, it can remain open while a lawsuit which questions its legality on environmental grounds continues to play out. The new decision puts an immediate halt to a previous lower court ruling which had ordered the state to immediately stop expanding the detention center as well as begin dismantling a significant chunk of the entire facility, and that was going to happen within the next couple of months. Now, the Department of Homeland Security calls the new ruling an enormous win for the American people, the rule of law, and for common sense as well. They also say that the lawsuit was never really about environmental issues at all, and that it was simply filed by open border activists as an excuse to stop law enforcement from removing dangerous criminal illegal aliens from our communities. Now, in the meantime, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, you know that guy, proudly says that right now Alligator Alcatraz remains open for business as usual and that his state plans to continue leading the way when it comes to our nation's immigration enforcement efforts. He also says that the Sunshine State has just opened a second migrant detention center called Deportation Depot up the road just a smidgen, located inside a former correctional facility in the northern part of the state, which is already in the process of receiving its first set of detainees. Florida officials say right now Deportation Depot can hold up to 1,500 detainees. They say they plan to fill the facility to capacity as soon as possible and that it's going to make a great addition to Alligator Alcatraz. They also say that unlike Alligator Alcatraz, they're not expecting any legal resistance to the new Deportation Depot facility. Meanwhile, the groups that filed the lawsuit to challenge the legality of Alligator Alcatraz due to the facility's environmental impact on the Florida Everglades say the fight, it's far from over, and they still believe that in the end they're going to ultimately win their case. Well, no, not exactly. A final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, the Trump administration, they have worked, and they're continuing to work harder than any previous administration to secure the border, stop the flow of illegal immigrants, take into custody those illegal immigrants who are already here, and finally, to detain and deport that rather large segment of the population. It's a lot of work. Now, these individuals, they've broken the law. They've entered the country illegally, and many of them have committed additional crimes while they're right here in the U.S. Now, before deportation can actually be carried out, detention centers, they're necessary, and so-called Alligator Alcatraz facility merely a resource that's essential to carrying out a critical mission. Naturally, there will be those who will attempt to use the courts to stop the process, but clearly the higher court has now ruled that the center will remain open. The mission will continue as scheduled, and yeah, Alligator Alcatraz is in fact fulfilling its purpose. So the center is ideally situated on an airfield. It's an effective location to house those individuals who are already in custody and prepare them for deportation. It's very convenient. You should also know that the site was affordably built. No proof that the environment is being damaged. It's in the Everglades. It's a swamp, and by all accounts, detainees are arguably being well tended to. Alligator Alcatraz, for now, open and thriving, getting the job done. Your thoughts and your comments on the big holding tank, they're highly encouraged, and you'll catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, back to the email bag. What are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, we've got Merv writing to us from Tampa, Florida.
How you, Merv?
And he says, another tremendous victory for the Trump administration. The radical left is doing everything in their power to keep the president from saving our country, but in the end, those illegal immigrants can run, but they can't hide.
Yeah, there are still a number of illegal immigrants who are hiding, and that goes to the immigration raids that are happening all across the country. We got a big immigration raid to share with you coming up in a couple of minutes, but yeah, we are rounding up the illegal immigrants. They've got to be housed somewhere before they're deported. So these facilities, Alligator Alcatraz, the other one, Deportation Depot, and other facilities that are popping up nationwide, absolutely necessary. I appreciate you checking in, Merv. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Susan, who's writing to us from Lewis Beach, Delaware.
Welcome to the program, Susan.
Susan says, quote, right now, that self-congratulatory administration of yours is all smiles, but sooner or later, the bill will come due for their flagrant disregard for humanity. Instead of Alligator Alcatraz, they should call the place Crooked Cash Grab.
Well, listen, the Trump administration is doing a job that previous administrations talked about but never did. So I don't know that vilifying them is going to further your narrative. Another thing that a lot of folks are concerned about is some people are concerned about the environmental impact, which I don't see. There's also that NIMBY notion. Yeah, we need these facilities, but not in my backyard. Absolutely not. Well, look, the second facility, Deportation Depot, it's likewise wholly necessary, just like the first one. It's clean, it's affordable, it's a pre-existing, no longer in use state jail. It's already there. And this is all part of taking our nation back. So to criticize the Trump administration, you're absolutely wrong. One step at a time, we're getting immigration under control. We started by securing the borders. We're trying to round up as many illegal immigrants as we can, house them in a very humanitarian and respectful way, and then send them out, deport them out of the country. It's a big project. It's a big program. Other administrations have talked about it. You didn't vilify them. This administration is doing something about it, but you're vilifying them, and it doesn't make a lick of sense. All right, stick now with a bit of a related topic, and we'll take a look at the astounding results which are now emerging from one of the largest single-site immigration enforcement raids in our nation's entire history. This is what we just alluded to. A federal Homeland Security agency now saying they've just arrested 475 illegal immigrants during a massive operation which targeted the construction site of a Hyundai battery-making factory just being built outside of Savannah, Georgia. Now, the workplace raid was led by an agency known as Homeland Security Investigations, also called HSI, who say the operation was the largest their group has ever undertaken. Also included a number of other law enforcement agencies, including ICE, you know them as Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The FBI took part as well, and the Georgia State Patrol. Officials say that although the operation was aimed at a facility which is being built to produce batteries for Hyundai's electric vehicles, many of the individuals were arrested who were actually working for subcontractors when they were taken into custody. They also say that the raid sends a very clear message that anyone who breaks the law and exploits our workforce by hiring illegal immigrants will eventually be held accountable for their crimes. Absolutely. Now, look, as a result of the raid, construction at the 3,000-acre site, it has been temporarily suspended. The enormous multi-billion-dollar facility, the largest single industrial investment in Georgia's history, and it is expected to be fully operational by the end of this year. Hyundai says that so far as they know, none of their employees were detained in the bust. However, they are a South Korean company, and as a result, that nation is sending a number of top officials to the site to protect the interest of any of their citizens who were actually arrested during that raid. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, the Trump administration, I'm sure, is thrilled that Hyundai is doing business here in our country. You know, jobs are being created, the economy is benefiting, and this could be a win-win for everyone. However, when any company, particularly a foreign company, sets up shop here in the U.S. and clearly breaks the law by having in its employ illegal immigrants, we're going to have a problem, and a big one at that. And whether or not these illegal immigrants arrested in this raid were working directly for Hyundai, or as they say, for a subcontractor, they're still working at the facility. And it's the responsibility of Hyundai to ensure that their staffers, even if they are subcontracted out, it's their responsibility to make sure those people are legal to work here in the U.S. That the South Korean Foreign Ministry is unhappy with this raid and the consequences of the raid, that's absolutely absurd. Hyundai is a South Korean company doing business in the USA, right here at home. And as such, they have to respect our rules, our laws, and our customs, much the same way as a U.S.-based corporation here would do if we were conducting business in South Korea. Pardon me, Davey. You will recall the old expression, Davey, when in Rome. What's the rest of that statement?
When in Rome, do as the Romans do, Bill? Is that
Pretty much, yeah. We're going to do business respectfully if we're in their country, and they need to do it respectfully here in our country. So you may have a similar point of view. You may object with the raid. Either way, tell us what you're thinking while I take a sip of tea. And we are at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to the email bag. What you got?
Okay, Bill, let's start out with Cleet, who's writing to us today from Chicago, Illinois.
Cleet, it is great to have you here.
And Cleet says, you know what I call that giant raid?
Yeah.
A good start. Time for those companies to start paying Americans fair wages instead of exploiting cheap illegal immigrant labor.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're working cheap or not. The bottom line is it's a South Korean company. We welcome that company to the U.S. We're glad to have them here. They're generating jobs. We're pumping money back into the economy. But yeah, don't do things on the cheap. We all assume that if you're not a legal citizen, yeah, you're going to work a little cheaper, so they're going to save a lot of money. But you're clearly violating U.S. laws. We welcome you. We want to do business with you, but you got to do it fair. You got to have a square deal. All right, moving along now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on in the News Roundup newsroom. President Trump signing an executive order to change the name of our nation's Defense Department to the Department of War in a move which signifies our country's military readiness to the entire world. The U.S. military deploying 10 F-35 fighter jets to the island of Puerto Rico as the Trump administration ramps up their efforts to combat violent drug cartels throughout that region. And electric vehicle maker Tesla offering the world's richest man, you know this guy, Elon Musk, a massive pay package which could ultimately make him the planet's first trillionaire. That's trillionaire, Davey, with a CH, trillionaire, which would be 1 and I think 10 or 12 or 15 zeros at the end. You do the math. However, in order to cash in fully on the big-time deal, the former Doge father, he'll need to hit a number of extremely, almost impossible, ambitious targets for the popular EV line, including enormous jumps in production, profit, and a whole bunch more. All right, switch things up now just a bit and take a glance at some hot topics which are making headlines today in the world of business. And we do that because it's just, as we always say, good business. The EU, the European Union, hitting big tech giant Google with a giant $3.5 billion fine for breaking the rules when it comes to competition in digital advertising services. In the meantime, things are looking no better for Google in the U.S., where a federal jury has just ordered the company to fork over more than $425 million, and that's for invading the privacy, they say, of their users by spying on their smartphones. Japan-based Hitachi announcing plans to invest $1 billion to help build out our nation's power grid infrastructure as the economy looks to profit from our country's record-setting electricity demands, and that's in large part due to the construction of a large number of big tech AI data centers. We all know how energy-thirsty those centers can be. And California-based electric vehicle manufacturer Rivian reducing their overhead by laying off a number of employees as the company preps the launch of an affordable electric SUV within the coming year. Make it affordable, absolutely. By the way, looks like they're going to have a bit of competition as high-performance car maker Ferrari now confirming plans to release their very first EV sometime next fall. David, correct me if I'm wrong, this is not what Enzo Ferrari had in mind when he invented the Ferrari, right?
Well, I don't know. It depends how fast it goes, right, Bill?
Possibly. But when you think Ferrari, you think of a 12-cylinder rocket engine. You don't think of an electric battery. I love the Ferraris, but it's got to have an engine. And now time for the lighter side of news, where we take an entertaining look at a few fascinating stories which are guaranteed to leave you smiling unless you're a total grump. Davey, I don't see you smiling. I don't want you to be a grump. Put it on. Big smile.
I'm a grump, better. Bill. What can I tell you?
All right, kick things off today by introducing you to one of the smartest people in the entire world. No, not that guy, engineer Davey, producer Davey, and not that guy, engineer Henry. At his age, most people can't even tie their own shoes. The guy we're going to talk about right now. 4-year-old genius from Illinois named Zorian Royce. So smart, he's already been invited to join the elite Mensa Society for brilliant people after acing his IQ test with a nearly perfect score. After Zorian's parents, by the time the little prodigy turned 2 years old, according to them, he was already reading books, counting backwards from 100, and spelling difficult words like Davey, a little help?
Bill, that would be hippopotamus.
That's the one, hippopotamus and alligator. I can't spell those words now. I can barely pronounce those words without some help from producer Davey. Additionally, little Zorian already working on learning a handful of different languages, and he says that when he grows up, wants to be a scientist for NASA. In the meantime, he says that right now he enjoys playing sports, solving puzzles as well, and that his favorite place in the entire world to hang out is the library. Look, the guy's 4 years old, has a genius IQ, a member of Mensa, and he's bilingual on top of that. You know, Davey, I'm a couple of semesters older than Zorian, but I still have to pass my final algebra exam to get my GED. I've also been trying since 1985 to solve the Rubik's Cube puzzle, but I've made no progress. Sometimes, producer Davey, life just... well, it ain't fair. All right, I got to climb out of my slump, and I can't begin to imagine where we go from here. Davey Cakes, what do you got?
How about let's head to the tallest mountain in Japan for our next story, Bill?
Sounds good enough to me. We turn now to a heartwarming story proving you're never too old to leave your mark on the world. This guy's 102 years old. He's from Japan, just established a world record by becoming the oldest person ever to climb to the top of his country's legendary Mount Fuji. The record-setting climber says that the journey was so difficult that he was ready to call it quits by the time he hit the halfway mark. However, spurred on by his 70-year-old daughter and a whole bunch of friends from his local mountain climbing club, he eventually made it to the summit. Goes on to say that he spent 3 months training to climb Japan's tallest mountain, which tops out at more than 12,000 feet. That this time was much more difficult than when he last reached the summit at the ripe young age of 96, and that he's not likely to ever try it again in the future because he's never felt weaker in his entire life. He's got to take a nap. Hey, look, anytime a centenarian can get out of bed and start the day, that is a substantial accomplishment. At 102 years old, to climb to the top of Mount Fuji, more than 12,000 feet, that's otherworldly. And the fact that he's done it twice now clearly makes this guy absolutely a legend. I admire people who can climb, Davey, and it's not easy. And you know, at my house, I had to have that chairlift installed, which takes me from the first floor to the second floor and sometimes back to the first floor. You know, Davey, I don't want to overdo it. You don't object to me getting the chairlift, do you?
Well, Bill, I think it's a little bit pricey, that's for sure.
It's worth every nickel if I don't got to climb up and climb back down. And before we cruise on over to the weekend, let's just do one more story and then we'll wrap it all up. Davey, what's our final caper?
Okay, Bill. Well, do you like the show The Love Boat?
I love The Love Boat. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this story has nothing to do with that, but it does indeed have to do with a cruise ship. So.
Oh, all right. As long as there's a boat involved, then I'll find the love in there somehow. Finally, today, a Titanic story to rock your world, especially if you're a fan of long seagoing vacations on gigantic cruise ships, ships that are bigger than the SS Minnow. Royal Caribbean now announcing that the world's heaviest cruise ship, an enormous vessel called Legend of the Seas, now floating on the water for the very first time. Company says that it took them more than 12 hours to fill the ship's dry dock with over 92 million gallons of water before they were eventually able to move the ship, that they're now putting the finishing touches on the vessel, little paint here and there, some Bondo work, and that if all goes according to plan, the Legend will make its grand debut sometime next year in Barcelona, Spain, España. In the meantime, the ship, check it out, 18 decks, 7 gigantic pools, a whole bunch of restaurants, room for more than 7,500 smiling, suntan lotion lathering passengers. And if you're looking to hop on board for a little cruise, set to dock in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, sometime in November of 2026. Yeah, it does sound like a fun little boat ride, but I think I'd prefer to cruise around the harbor, Davey, in the News Roundup kayak. You know, the kayak isn't quite as large, but it gets the job done. It even has room service. Did you know the News Roundup kayak, Davey, has room service?
I was not aware of that, Bill. What kind of room service does it have?
Well, I just bring tuna sandwiches with me every time I hit the ocean blue, but I count that as room service. Now, this monstrosity, not the News Roundup kayak, the big boat, is basically a floating city. Sounds like they've got pretty much everything. As you just heard, Davey says 18 decks, a couple dozen elevators, handful of swimming pools, and a whole bunch of diners. Oddly, Davey, and I'm checking the email right now, I can see a lot of people are saying what I was just thinking. They didn't make any mention of bathrooms. So, producer Davey, you found the story. Do they have bathrooms on that big giant boat?
Well, I'm sure they do, Bill, but I really didn't investigate that aspect of it.
Well, it's something everybody wants to know. Nobody minds going out for a nice ocean cruise and 18 decks and 100 swimming pools and 20 different restaurants. But we all want to know if there's bathrooms on that boat. Also, if you go out to sea on a 250,000-ton boat, do you really want to hang out with 7,600 people? I need my alone time, Davey. Or go on that cruise if it's you and I and engineer Henry and engineer Jamie and the News Roundup crew, but 7,600 other people. I don't think so. All right, quick look there at the lighter side of news. Hit us up with any thoughts or comments, questions or concerns. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Quickly, Davey, to the email bag. I can smell the weekend. It is this far away. And who's up first?
Okay, Bill. Well, here's one from Randy in Omaha, Nebraska.
Hi, Randy.
And Randy says, hats off to that old guy making it up that mountain.
Yeah.
I'm 34, and I'm not sure I could climb the stairs in my high-rise office building.
Yeah, and that's why, listen, do what I did. Put the chairlift in. That's the way to go. I have never been happier walking up from the first floor to the second floor and back downstairs again. That was getting exhausting. That chairlift, Davey, has saved my life. And kudos to a guy who's 102 years old, climbing 12,000 feet to the top of Mount Fuji. And one more. Who's up next?
Yeah, very, very inspirational.
Yeah.
Here's one from Diana, who's writing to us today from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi, Diana.
And she says, thank you for sharing those inspiring stories. The young genius and the old mountain climber are my new heroes, and you've just made my day.
Yeah, the world isn't always bad. All the news isn't always bad news. That's a great story. A guy 102 years old who's got the fortitude to get out of bed, stay motivated, and do something that I can't imagine a single person my age or 20 years younger could do. Climb 12,000 feet to a mountain peak. And the 4-year-old boy genius. That's amazing. A lot of folks spend their whole life, Davey, in college and university, graduate degrees and PhDs. Here's a guy who just comes out and he's there. It's all there. It's already in his head. Kind of like Mozart, a great genius. Elton John, a great musical genius as well. A lot of us study and work and work and work. Not that they didn't, but they have that intelligence already built into their DNA, and it's just fascinating. And now it's time for us to call it a wrap on the Aloha Friday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day right here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these thought-provoking words come to us today from Alexander Graham Bell, who said, "Sometimes we stare so long at a door that is closing that we see too late the one that is open." Bell was a well-known Canadian-American inventor, scientist, and engineer who received a patent for the first telephone and who co-founded the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T, way back in 1885. And as you know, Davey, Bell was an inventor, right?
He was an inventor, yes.
Great inventor. He invented, as far as I know, the Bell brand potato chips, right? Alexander Graham Bell, Bell brand potato chips?
I don't know that he was a potato chip inventor, Bill, but he did invent the telephone.
I just assumed it said Bell and Bell brand potato. I assumed they were tied in. And now it is time for us to hit the road. But before we go, today happens to be National Cheese Pizza Day. So don't forget to grab a slice of your favorite cheese pizza. You know, David, there's only one way to ruin a pizza. You know what that is?
What's that, Bill?
Make it a cheese pizza. Nobody eats a cheese pizza. You got to have a bunch of junk on top. Sausage, pepperoni, pineapple, olives, bell peppers, and all the rest. Do you eat cheese pizza, Davey?
I do, Bill. If it's good cheese pizza, it's good enough.
It needs toppings. It needs toppings. Also, the enormous Powerball jackpot, now in the neighborhood of $1.8 billion, with the next big drawing scheduled for tomorrow night. And now it is time for us to race on out of here for the weekend. But before we call it a day, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. We need your help. There are so many things you can do. For example, you can subscribe to our program so you never miss even a single episode. Follow us on your favorite social media platform and show us some love, for crying out loud. Score us one of those highly sought-after 5-star reviews. Tastier than a piece of cheese pizza. Better yet, you can head over to our Hot Rock and Flame-Throwing YouTube channel and just look for News Roundup with Bill Thomas. Give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to click on the bell that pops up to receive notifications and never miss a single episode. By the way, the News Roundup, we're available on Apple and Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, and everywhere you find your podcasts. For now, it looks like our time is officially up, so have an awesome day today. Enjoy your weekend as well. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And Engineer Henry, I'll ask you to please dim the lights. Very gently fade to black. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday afternoon.